Will you be conscripted for World War III? It's the alarming question suddenly splashed across headlines and popping up in conversations all over the UK. We're hearing a steady beat of warnings from top military commanders, seeing quiet but important changes to the law, and watching new recruitment ideas get rolled out. It's easy to get swept up in the noise. When a former head of the British Army, General Sir Patrick Sanders, says the UK needs a citizen army to prepare for a future war, people pay attention. And when the government starts changing the rules to make it easier to call people up to fight, it's only natural to wonder, am I next? So how much of this is real, and how much is just fear-mongering? We're going to look at the actual evidence and figure out if you'll really be forced to fight. To figure out if you'll be conscripted, we have to understand why this is even a topic of discussion. For decades, the West enjoyed what was called a peace dividend. After the Cold War, the idea of a massive land war in Europe felt like something from the history books, and defense budgets were cut. That feeling has been shattered. These warnings aren't happening in a bubble. In January 2024, General Sir Patrick Sanders didn't mince words, arguing that to prepare for a potential war, the nation would need a whole nation of undertaking. He said that while professional armies start wars, it's citizen armies that win them, a phrase that immediately makes everyone think of conscription. This comes as military leaders are sounding the alarm that the UK just doesn't have the resources or the people for a major fight. Reportedly, the most senior military officer in the UK, Air Chief Marshal Sir Richard Knighton, has warned the Prime Minister that the Ministry of Defence is facing a black hole in its budget of around £28 billion. In this perfect storm, a growing sense of threat combined with a military that feels dangerously overstretched, that has shoved the idea of national service back into the spotlight. This is where we need to separate the scary headlines from the hard facts. The government is making significant moves, but neither of them is a conscription bill for you and me. So first, let's talk about the so-called gap year scheme. This is a voluntary program set to launch around March 2026, offering about 150 paid spots for people under 25 to get a year of military experience. The goal is to expand it, but here's the key. There's no obligation to join the military full-time when the year is over. It's being sold as a skills and leadership course, not a draft. The second change is more serious, and it's the source of most of the confusion. The government has introduced a new armed forces bill that makes big changes to the Strategic Reserve. Now, this is important. The Strategic Reserve is a pool of people who have already served in the military. This does not apply to the general public. The new bill does two main things. First, it raises the maximum age for these veterans to be called back from 55 to 65. And second, and this is the big one, it lowers the legal reason that they can be called up. Before, it had to be a national danger, great emergency, or attack on the UK. The new law changes that to warlike preparations. Now that is a huge shift. It means the government doesn't have to wait for an attack. It can start mobilizing its roughly 95,000 experienced veterans if it believes another country is simply getting ready for war. But again, to be absolutely clear, this applies to those with prior military service, not to you if you've never signed up. If you're finding this breakdown useful and want to get more analysis that gets straight to the point on anything to do with Britain, make sure to subscribe and hit that like button. It really helps us to keep making these deep dives. Now look at the actual state of the military. The heart of this issue really comes down to numbers. As of early 2025, the British Army had a trained regular force of about 73,800 soldiers. Its lowest level since the Napoleonic Wars. While recent data shows recruitment intake is up and the number of people leaving is down, the armed forces are still shrinking overall. This has led to some former commanders warning that the UK simply doesn't have enough troops for a large-scale conflict. So what does the public think? Well, the country is completely split. A YouGov poll from September 2023 showed that a compulsory year-long military draft is deeply unpopular, with 64% of Brits against it. Another poll from early 2024 found that about 30% of people under 40 would refuse to serve, even if the UK was facing an imminent invasion. At the same time, a different YouGov poll from June 2024 found that the public was against a proposed national service plan, but only by 52% to 39% in support, showing a deep divide. This creates a massive political headache for any government thinking about a draft. Forcing it through wouldn't just be unpopular, it would be, as one historian put it, electorally toxic. It's crucial to remember that Britain has used conscription before, but only in the most extreme situations. In World War I, the government brought in the Military Service Act in 1916, after the initial wave of volunteers had been exhausted by the sheer horror of trench warfare. In World War II, the National Service Act was passed in 1939, as the country faced the existential threat of Nazi Germany. In both cases, conscription was a last resort, brought in when the country was already fighting for its very survival. The changes we're seeing today are not a repeat of that history. They're focused entirely on making it easier for the government to recall trained military veterans, not on drafting civilians. It's a move to get the country on a higher state of readiness, but it isn't a return to the national drafts of the 20th century. So let's bring it all together and answer the main question: will you be conscripted? Based on all the evidence, the answer is almost certainly no. Not in the way you're probably thinking. A full-scale mandatory draft of young civilians is not yet on the table. The Prime Minister's office has been explicit, stating it has no intention of introducing conscription and highlighting the military's proud tradition of being a voluntary force. There are huge practical and political roadblocks to a real draft. First, the cost. Training, housing, and equipping hundreds of thousands of unwilling recruits would be astronomically expensive, especially when the defence budget is already under serious strain. The infrastructure to even handle that kind of influx doesn't even exist anymore. Second, the political fallout would be catastrophic. With public opinion so divided, and younger people strongly against it, any government trying to force a draft would face a massive public backlash. What is actually happening is something far more specific. The government isn't trying to build a civilian army from scratch. It's changing the law to make it faster and easier to bring its large pool of trained veterans back into service. That change in the law allowing a recall for warlike preparations is a serious step. It's a signal that the UK is moving from a peacetime mindset to what some are calling a pre-war world. It's about being able to quickly expand the professional army with skilled people if a crisis gets worse. And the gap year scheme? That's a soft power move to boost voluntary recruitment. Think of it as an advertisement, not an enlistment order. So the scary headlines about a new draft are a massive oversimplification. There are no active plans to force young Brits into uniform. However, the ground is definitely shifting. The government is quietly building the legal framework to remobilise its experienced forces faster than at any time since the Cold War. You won't be getting a draft card in the mail anytime soon, but the fact these laws are being changed is a clear sign that the government and its military leaders are taking the threat of a major war more seriously than they have in a generation. The real story isn't about conscripting you. It's about a nation slowly waking up to a more dangerous world. What are your thoughts on all this? Are these changes a sensible precaution or a step too far? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. And for more deep dives into issues shaping our glorious nation, make sure you're subscribed. Thanks for watching.